From her kick-ass voice to those amazing augmented cybernetic implants, Airiam was the best badass sort of background player we could ever hope for in Star Trek, and her journey has come to a very awesome end, an emotional end at the very least. Cam, what is your take on the demise of Airiam and essentially getting a single episode arc to kind of cover the entire character?
Yeah, I found like Airiam to be a character I constantly want to see more of. Like, I don't want to see her necessarily as the captain of the ship, but like I think of, you know, how much they gave O'Brien, say in TNG, where like they had this great background character and you'd get to see him in a poker game. Moments like that. And I think this episode where we had the death and we got these great flashback moments of her interacting with the crew, I was like, these moments are working like gangbusters. I wish I'd had these throughout season 1 and 2 just to build to this moment.
You know, and I think the big situation though is like, well, does that mean that the emotional, you know, punch doesn't land for the audiences when we see a character get sacrificed like the way that she did at the end of this? That said, I think what really carries this is the whole Tilly stuff that's going on, where we are invested in Tilly's feelings for this character. And look, Mary Wiseman is hitting it out of the ballpark here. I think this worked much better than that whole May arc that she had early on in the season, where I didn't invest in those characters at all emotionally. But all of a sudden, Airiam comes out of the woodwork. She's never had more to do in a single episode, and it was great. And like you said, it makes us think, well, they could have been doing more with her earlier on throughout the run of the series. But look, I'm happy with what we got here. I think this is a great way for a character like this to go out. And I also wonder how much of it was because maybe the spore drive operator wasn't really going to have a job on the ship going forward if eventually we expect the spore drive to go the way of the dodo bird.
For sure. And I mean, having a character basically fighting against their own body saying, you know, kill me, that's one of those moments that's just so brutal because, you know, you see it in things even like the Alien franchise where someone has like a xenomorph inside them or a facehugger or whatever it's called when it's in their, you know, abdomen. And you get the conflict out of the main characters because it's still the person they recognize. It's still speaking to them logically, but they have to make this terrible, terrible decision. And I like that Airiam's death, you know, while I didn't necessarily want to see this character go, it put Burnham in a really, really tough position and was really dramatically interesting and exposed a weakness to the character that has been something that I think is going to be interesting to mine going forward.
One thing that we should point out is that Airiam, as we're going through her memories, never had any fond memories of Nan. Is that
she's got less now?
Yeah, well, is that the reason why Nan had no problem pulling the trigger and letting her go out of that airlock, Cam?
Yeah, I felt bad for Nan. Having those things on your face that make you that vulnerable. Not the best place for when you're in a fight.
Glad I'm not a Barzan or a Benzite or any sort of alien requiring an apparatus to breathe on a Federation facility.
Now, do you think Discovery maybe learned some lessons with like the death of Lorca and maybe even Georgiou to an extent, where this season where we had Saru have a near-death experience, and we had Airiam. And it really does feel like these two deaths have been given far more fanfare than those two, or Culber for that matter, in season 1 as well.
Yeah, you know, for me, the Culber one was interesting that it seemed to come out of nowhere. It seemed so sudden. So it did actually hit me hard, even though he wasn't given a lot of fanfare, as you say. The Lorca one, I just kind of shrugged my shoulders, and I really didn't think that landed for me at all.
Yeah.
The Georgiou, I had mixed feelings about because we knew the character for a very short period of time, but I still became very attached to her. So I think you are correct. They are learning a lot of lessons about the way that they dispatched with other main characters. The fascinating thing here, though, is like this death worked for me, and this wasn't really a main character. This was a glorified background player, which is kind of a different thing for Star Trek to give so much time and attention to essentially what is, you know, the quote-unquote red shirt. Sure. Have you ever cared so much about a red shirt's death before, ever?
Oh my God, that's an excellent question. There is nothing that is springing to mind in the moment.
But Joe Carey. I
mean, you know, you bring it up on the podcast, but I think Edith Keeler's a good example. She's not a red shirt, but it's a one-episode character that I think we have a lot of investment in. You know, when Kirk has to let her die, I think that's a very tragic moment for that character and for Kirk, obviously. But yeah, in terms of actual crew members, I don't know that there's anyone that springs to mind.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we want to think about though is, you know, Lorca, he's only been mentioned once since his death, really. I guess I should say once so far in season 2.
Right.
Do you think that the memory of Airiam is going to carry on a little bit longer? They're not going to have traumatic, you know, feelings that are attached to Airiam, much the way
Sure.
that they have with Lorca.
I hope there is acknowledgement of Airiam, maybe in the next episode. I don't expect, season 3, episode 8, they're like, remember Airiam and that smile she had?
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen, but I think kind of one of the smart things Discovery did, in a sense of, if you want to get rid of the Airiam character, is that they show in this episode her flashbacks, through her memories, are tied very much to characters like Awashkin and Detmer, characters who don't get a lot of character development on the show. So you can easily be like, they really suffered over that.
Yeah.
But you don't have to showcase it because you're focusing more on Spock, Pike, Burnham, all those main characters.
But it also makes sense that so many of her memories are tied to more of the ancillary characters as well.
Yeah.
I like the fact they are acknowledging that all these other crew members have their own independent lives beyond the main characters that we are following here. I think that's like a really smart thing. It kind of reminds me of, an episode like the Lower Decks from Next Generation.
For sure. And I think it's really interesting that they're using Tilly as the bridge character.
Yeah.
Not just because she's on the bridge, but also because, she's obviously mingling with these Lower Decks characters, but she also is entered the world of the main crew, so we kind of get that back and forth between the two. It doesn't feel like this weird caste system,
right,
where you're like, like the ones who are up top, like your Stamets and your Burnhams are kind of like the snobby crew, the cool kids, if you will, and then the other ones are down below like, oh shucks.
Okay, well, I guess the best we can hope for moving forward, though, is Mirror Universe Airiam.